Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 440, Brand Upon the Brain, directed by Maddin, 2006. When I first heard about this film as a Criterion release, it was something that I looked at the synopsis and I went, ooh, this looks very interesting. But I never really got around to purchasing it until many years later. There was a showing of the film at the Brattle Theatre in Cambridge. Actually, it was a double feature with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And so I thought, perfect, get 2 for 1, a film that I wanted to see and a film that I consider one of my all-time favorites. So it was a great deal. And boy, oh boy, I was prepared. There's being prepared for the weirdness and then actually experiencing it. The best way to the film itself, it's about a guy named Guy Maddin, although not actually played by him. He returns to a lighthouse on Black Notch Island, where he grew up, and he's there to make amends with his mother because his mother is dying, and while he's there, most of the film is all flashes back to his childhood, living in this lighthouse and dealing with a very overbearing mother and a mysterious father who, and both of them run an orphanage that, and the father devises this way of extracting this special elixir coming from the base of children's necks. Makes this elixir that makes people young, and he uses this on his wife, she's obsessed with not so much her youth, but wanting to go back to innocence, before she felt that her innocence is corrupted. So, and on top of that, there's a detective supposed team, this brother sister team, kind of Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys type affair, except it gets weird. There's a whole bunch of weirdness that it's really hard to summarize succinctly. But what's really fascinating about it is the technique and the style is very rooted in silent film. As I was watching it the first time, I was thinking of Georges Méliès, particularly Voyage to the Moon. I was thinking of some of the surrealist filmmakers, or surrealist-like filmmakers, like Jean Cocteau and Louis Buñuel. There was also a part that made me think of Stan Brakhage, not so much in there's no superimpositions and layerings, but the way things were shot and edited, there's a sort of poetic rhythm and a very visceral experience. And then there's all the parts that remind me of David Lynch. It's sort of this weird amalgamation of different cinema histories is what it feels like in terms of techniques. But it doesn't feel like a complete callback, or it's not a throwback to those styles. It's like, oh, I'm just making silent films because I want to do it. It's both a celebration of those styles, and perhaps it's the only way to tell this story, which is, while it has a lot of surreal elements, it also is rooted in something very personal to Guy Maddin. He calls this film about 97% true. He says that his family did not run an orphanage, and I don't think there's a mad scientist in there, but I think a lot of the emotions and sensations, and I think certainly the fantasies that he may have had. He just puts it in there. So what I take away from this this little eccentric oddity, and it's said with affection. I'm not disparaging the film at all, but it is. But be forewarned, it is quite odd. But one of the big takeaways from this is that this is the benefit of making a personal investment into your work. When you really put yourself into what you're doing, it makes it really captivating and interesting, and it can even, and especially when you've set it up with this very strange, wild ride, you go along with it because you could feel the emotions and the sensations and everything. It just radiates in the shots and in the way things are shot, and also the way everything fits together. So that's a big takeaway from this film. The other big takeaway is, and this came through at the one of the featurettes in this called 97% True, where it's a bunch of interviews with Guy Maddin and some of his collaborators talking about the film, and also a little bit about himself, because this is his debut into the collection, and he has done films before. The other titles are not coming. The other titles are not coming to me right at this moment. But he has done other films prior to this. But this is his introduction into the collection. So it's a way of getting to know a little bit about the guy. And Guy Maddin himself, he was. When he went to college, specifically at the University of Manitoba, he got interested in modernist literature, and particularly the kind of literature that had more of a surrealist bent to it, or surrealist feel. Not necessarily having to be directly attached to the movement, because again, arts movements were political, and not in the nation state sense, but just in terms of who you know and who you got along with. But literature that has dreamlike imagery and is evoking, based on memories and so forth. There's a Polish author that he mentioned that I forget the name of, that he talked about as being a big influence on him. So he got into literature, but then he eventually got into a lot of film, and particularly the surrealist filmmakers. And Buñuel was a big influence on him. And he had aspirations to be a writer himself, but he felt that he could never reach the level of the literature that he liked. But then he came to the realization that, what if I could make films and satisfy my creative desire and be able to pull it off? And so that's how he started making films. And his films have always had that surreal, strange quality, and very much rooted in the silent film aesthetic. But again, it doesn't feel like a throwback. It feels like it's almost as if Millet were still making films now, and considering everybody else making their mark on cinema, it's taking advantage of that. But anyways, so the point of bringing up all of this is that there's, at some point in the interview, he talks about melodrama and how he was. That's another film style that he was heavily influenced by, and he talks about how melodramas they're often used pejoratively to describe a film. Usually when you describe a film as melodramatic, it means, oh, it's exaggerated, it's over the top, it's unrealistic, it's even implausible, and it's done in a very disparaging way. But there is something great about a really good melodrama. And the way he describes it is that in your waking life, you have have inhibitions. You have things that keep you in check. You don't go out if there's someone you lust after, you don't just go right up to them. If there's something that you want, you don't steal it. You have to pay for it. You have these desires, but you always keep your desires in check when you're in the waking world. If someone pisses you off, you don't just punch them in the face. And if you're really pissed off, you don't bludgeon them and kill them. So your desires are always kept in check by a sense of judgment and foresight in saying, maybe you should back off, or no, you shouldn't really do this. But in your dreams, your desires can pretty much play themselves out however they want, because there isn't that restriction. And so for him, melodrama is not so much, and this is his words, it's not so much life exaggerated, but it's more truth uninhibited. And I'm really, really indebted to him for that definition. It's something that I keep in mind, because I too have, I understand what melodrama is, and I understand what good melodrama is. I definitely understand what bad melodrama is. And I think some of the things that I've written and want to make so far can fall into the category of melodrama, but I think it's more in the good sense rather than in the bad sense. It's not so much life exaggerated, but more truth uninhibited. There's an emotional honesty to it. In fact, something that I was thinking about for myself, that maybe what should happen is you could call it either realistic melodrama or melodramatic realism. Another film that I feel fits in this category, it's not on the Criterion Collection, but I'm thinking of Blue Valentine, because there's something about it that there is an emotional intensity in the story, but it's done within a realistic framework. I don't feel like it's exaggerated or anything. There's an element of realism, but it's not diluted or toned down. It's very upfront and in your face. So realistic melodrama or melodramatic realism. Jury's still out on which one will work. But anyways, the point of all that was that it's because of Guy Maddin's take on the term melodrama and how he defines it. I think it gives it it makes it a safe word and not just purely a pejorative. But so yeah, it's, if you like surreal films, if you like films with a certain oddity, and it's not, I think what's great about it is that there is more or less a pretty straightforward narrative, but it's just it's these images and sensations and everything. The other interesting thing about it was that when it actually played in theaters, it actually was a road show where there was because it was shot silent, there was a live orchestra playing, plus a group of Foley artists to provide the sounds, plus there's actually a castrato voice in there for one of the songs, and then finally an interlocutor, someone to help fill in the story, and this is actually a throwback to Japanese silent film, the Bonushi. So it's all this. So when it played, there was a spell when it played in theaters. It was a road show where everything was done live. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, and then it played at several shows in New York. And what made the New York shows particularly interesting was that there was a rotating cat. There were various interlocutors that wanted to jump in, and some of them are included in this release. In fact, the other reason why this release appealed to me was because one of the interlocutors was the poet John Ashbery, and I thought, oh, this would be really interesting. When the film plays in theaters with sound sync, there's no roadshow performance, when it's just played in theaters. So I did not have the live experience, but the default interlocutor is Isabella Rossellini. But other interlocutors have included Laurie Anderson, I mentioned John Ashbery, Louis Nagin, Eli Wallach, Udo Kier, and Crispin Glover. Yes, that guy. The snail man. Anyways, so really so yeah, if you don't mind your odd films, your eccentric films, and it really is desire uninhibited, and it makes no apologies for it, and in a way I don't think it should, because it's not advocating that you should fulfill your desires. I think it's just acknowledging that those desires are there, and it's if you acknowledge that they're there, at least you have a better way of dealing with it, and maybe all you really need to do is just to have that catharsis and then just move on. So this isn't some kind of advocacy thing. I think it's just it does feel more like a catharsis more than anything else, as well as just again someone who really is trying to is still refining and defining his style and making the best films that he can. So so it's definitely interesting, and I like the occasional oddity. So this is definitely right up my alley. So and if it's right up your alley, if David Lynch doesn't bother you, if you don't flinch by that, if you haven't flinched with Buñuel's early surrealist films, or anything that has a surreal or dreamlike quality to it, then this would be right up your alley. So, but I would not be upset if you just look at this and you go, I'm not interested in this at all. So it is one of those appeal to particular tastes, but I'd say if you are interested in it, or if you want to give it a shot, then at least it's worth a watch. But I understand if you just want to go, not really into it. So, Brand Upon the Brain. And until next time, take care.